guys, welcome back to another session. My name is Gabriel Udio and I'm a data analyst at Data Playground. So our lesson today would be focused on spreadsheets. Our very first four videos which we learned from, we took time to look at how to think like an analyst, and so our today's tutorial would be on the introduction to one of the most widely used tools in data analysis, which is spreadsheets. For this tutorial, I'll be using Google Sheets. You can make use of other softwares like Microsoft Excel, Zoho Sheets, and the numerous other softwares that you have. So to start with the Google Sheets, you just simply go to docs.google.com/spreadsheets. I'm working online, so and then I'm going to create a blank sheet. Now from here, every other thing that we need to know about spreadsheets will be explained as we move forward. So Google Sheets, first of all, is like the most widely used analytical tool in the world. Of course, you have SQL, your SQL as people would normally call it, and you have Python among the other many tools. But to be very honest, in most real world operations, spreadsheets are used every single day, and they help you, explore data, clean data, summarize data, and even shares with people who do not even know what SQL stand for. And if you actually try to skip past your knowledge of spreadsheets because you want to try the more advanced tools, you might have gaps in your practical skills. And these gaps will probably show up at the worst possible moments you can think of, right? So this particular video I'm making is going to help build your spreadsheets foundation properly, and by the time you finish this tool, Google Sheet would feel less like a tool that you're just trying to figure out, and to be more like a workspace that you control. So to start with, I'm just going to upload the file that will be making use of, to upload the file that we're making use of. By the way, I'm going to drop the link to the CSV file so that you can walk along with me. I'm going to drop the link to the CSV file in the description of this video, and then as we proceed with our work here on spreadsheets, I'll be taking time to explain everything that's worth knowing. So I'm going to just go to first you go to file, and then you go to import, and then I go to upload, browse. I've already downloaded it here on my PC. This is the file, so I'm going to also drop the link in the description of this video, as I said, so you all can follow along. So that's it. I want to replace the original sheet that was empty here, and then detect separator types. Now CSV means comma separated values. It means that the values are separated from each other with the use of comma. So while that file is being loaded into this spreadsheet, wherever comma is seen, it takes it as a value in a particular column, separate it from the rest. That's just the basic idea of it. So import data. And so once it's imported, we can see what we have here. We can see that we have a data set that contains 30 records. Why I said 30 records? Because the first row is column names, and then we have 30 records of customers, which stops at row 31. That's from row 2 to row 31. So when you talk about a spreadsheet is basically a grid, right? It's like a massive table that's just made up of rows and columns, and every intersection of a row and a column is called a cell. For example, if this is row 1, if this is row 1, and this is a column 1. These points where they intersect, these points here, they are all called cells. You can think of it like a city map, right? Let's say a city map whereby the columns are running vertically, right, going down, and then the rows are running horizontally, that's across, right? And so the columns are represented with letters while the rows are represented with numbers. And the point of intersection now becomes a cell, such that every cell has an address, right? For example, if you look at row 6, if you look at row 6 and column E, if I come to this particular cell that is here, the intersection of column E and row 6 give you a cell that will be called E6, right? That is how cells are addressed. They are addressed based on their column and then their row, the points where that intersection is made, right? For example, cell A1 contains order ID, right? You can say that let's say cell C5, right, is just an intersection of column C and row 5. So that system is how Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, is able to find things. This is how formulas can reference data, and is almost always how you be able to communicate about your spreadsheets with your colleagues. Now, when working, you deal with ranges. A range is simply a group of cells, right? That's basically what a range is. For example, instead of referring to cells one by one, a range can let you refer to a whole block at once. For example, if I want to take these values that are here now, okay, let me just take a smaller amount of values. If I want to take these three values that I highlighted now, this is from B5 down to D5, right? You can see it here. It is represented by a range here, B5 colon D5, right? For example, if I take from F2 to to F31, that means I'm taking all cells. The first cell I'm talking about is going to be at F2. The last cell is going to be at F31, right? And this particular one represents what are other amounts, is it not? So basically, taking ranges allows you to perform the same operation on a group of cells instead of trying to do them individually. So you use ranges constantly in formulas. For example, when you want to sum things like other amounts, and you have to tell Google Sheets add up everything. For example, in F2 to F31, and then the range is going to tell it exactly which cells to include. So now, lastly, before we move forward, we can talk about a workbook. Now, a workbook is the entire file you are working with. The whole of this is called a workbook, right? That's just what it is. And this point now, this is one sheet. I can create another sheet by coming to plus here, and which I can then rename, right? So all this I can create as many sheets as I like in a single workbook, right? So at this point, I think we can then proceed to the work which we have. So first of all, in working with spreadsheets, whenever you are given a particular spreadsheet or a particular data set rather to work with, the very first thing that you should try to do is to duplicate the original data. The purpose of duplicating the original data is so that in case at some point things go wrong, you can always fall back to the original data. So to duplicate, I'm just going to come down to this name here. I'm going to right click on it, and then I'm going to click on duplicate. And then I'm going to rename this one, right? I think I'll just rename this to cleaned data. Cleaned data. Maybe I should rename this one to raw data. Alright, so every work I'm going to be performing for the rest of this video would be on the cleaned data, so that you'll be able to, be able to to fall back in case there are any errors. So first I'm going to freeze, because I want to be able to scroll down and still see the row I'm working with. I'm going to start by freezing this row. So to do that, I would right click here. I will go to view more actions, and then I will say freeze up to row 1. So this allows me to easily scroll down and still be able to know which row, which column rather. I'm sorry. It's allowing me to scroll down and know which column I'm actually working with. Is it the order ID column, the customer name column, and the rest of them? The next thing I'm going to try to do is to be able to see each of the values. Okay, first let me make this bold. Let me do Control P here. Now to be able to see each of the values clearly, I'm going to come to this point. I'm going to double tap here. It just automatically fits things so that you can see clearly. I double tap here. I'll double tap here. Do the same thing here. Do the same thing here. Now that we have things looking at us clearly, um the next thing that we are just going to, that we are just going to try to do would be very, very simple. Let's try to study what our data looks like. By studying, the purpose of studying what our data looks like is to know what and what we are trying to look out for, right? So first we have the order ID. Now the order ID column, for what we can see here, we can see letters and numbers here, right? So you already know that this is not a numeric column actually, because it contains both letters and number. uh B is obviously a text column, because it just contains letters. Likewise column C, likewise column D. Now is a column that contains dates. Keep that in mind. uh Other amount is a column that contains uh it should contain currency, and then the last one should contain alpha text characters and all. So this the reason why I had to do this, so that we can be able to identify what operations need to be, or what operations can be performed on each of the columns that we are working with, especially because one of the things that we have to try to do is to format each of these columns to their right data types, right? So we can let me do this quickly. I'll just do a little formatting here so that we can begin to make things stand out to us. So I'm going to change the color of this the this row representing the column names. I'm just going to change it from white to, let's say light blue. Yeah, I think this works fine for us. So at this point we can try to proceed. Now if we look at this column F as it is actually contains plain numbers. Now it's of course technically correct, but it's not professional. It should contain currency, right? So we are going to try to make it look more like currency than just plain numbers which it is showing. So we are just going to quickly do this. I'm going to go to formats, and then I go to number here, right? Now, naturally, if I change the currency, most of the time it's just be in dollars direct, right? So I can come to custom currencies now. Custom currency allows you to select the particular currency that you want to use. Because I've used Nigerian Naira before, that's what you're seeing here. You can select a variety of other currencies that you have here. So I'm just going to use the Nigerian Naira though, because since I've used that already before. And then I'm just going to remove this decimal place, because I mean all of them are all point zero, so there's no need having them. So I'm just going to decrease decimal places here. I click that twice so that the job is done. And then coming to this point, there's no point having the naira symbol again if all the numbers already have the naira symbol there. So that's that. So automatically this particular column now is formatted as currency, right? So moving forward, moving forward, Let's look at column E. For column E, we can see that this particular column is supposed to contain dates, but depending on how your CSV was imported, the dates may actually just end up showing as plain text and rather than proper date values. So what we are going to do is to just convert it by ourselves. Let's just be sure. So I'm going to come to column E. I will come to format and then number again, and then I will format as a date, and let's see what happens. So it has changed, but I'm not sure if I really like this. So I think I would like to choose a custom date. So it looks like it looks almost like what was there before. So custom date, I would like month, day, and year. Or no, I think I would like, let's say, uh year, yeah, year, month, and day works fine for me. Yeah, this is more like it. So I prefer to just work with this particular format that is here. So we've done, little data formatting here. The next thing that we try to do is what we call conditional formatting. Now, conditional formatting helps to make patterns invisible instantly. You can change the appearance of a cell based on the value that is contained. So, like, for example, instead of trying to scan 30 rows of data to find all the failed deliveries or that is under delivery status, you can just make them highlighting, let's say, red automatically, and so that pattern is going to like become visible the moment you look at the sheet, right? So how do we go about this conditional formatting now? I will just come to this particular point here, and then I'll click the column name. I'll go to format, and then I'll come to conditional formatting. Now, at this point here, I will say if text is exactly right, field, right, and then I'll change the color to let's say light red. And you can see that every cell that contains field, they've all been highlighted in light red, and so they stand out easily to us now, and we can easily see what we have there. Next thing I would next thing that we can try to do now is, what is the difference? For example, if we're going to be able to work, we need to understand the difference between what we call absolute reference and relative reference, right? Because this is actually a concept that it can trip off a lot more spreadsheet users and almost anything else. Now, whenever you write a formula in Google Sheets, you actually make reference to cells, like I said earlier. For example, you want to say take the value in this particular cell and do something with it. But there are actually two completely different ways. A cell reference can be whenever you copy, a formula from one cell to another. So let me try to explain this using let's say, an analogy. Imagine you are trying to give someone directions to a particular place. Now, you can give them what we call relative directions. For example, if you tell the person who is looking for a place, you tell the person turn left at the next corner, then walk 2 blocks. Now, that those particular directions would work wherever the person is standing. But supposing they start from a different location, the destination, of course, is going to change, right? Another way to give a person direction is to give them what we call an absolute direction. Absolute direction is specific. For example, go to number 15, uh, St. John's Street, Lagos. Now that destination is going to be fixed, right? It doesn't change at all. It doesn't matter wherever the person starts. They always end up at the same place. So that's how cell reference and work. For example, if I take this cell J5, this is a relative or reference here, right? I'm going to create a special point here where I'll just call summary. Don't worry about all this, we'll always edit it anyway later. So VAT, I want my VAT to be 7.5%, right? So that will be 0.075 in terms of decimal. And so for me to be able to calculate my VAT for that is the value added tax for each of these other amounts, I have to multiply this guy by this guy that's here, is it not? So to be able to do that and ensure that everything remains constant, I'm going to have to say cell F2 multiplied by this guy. I want to say that no matter where this guy shifts to, this guy should always be referenced. So that will be cell F2 multiplied by, now how do I put absolute reference so that the same cell is always referenced at every point in time, nothing changes at all. I have to do, I have to use my dollar sign, right? And this 0.75, you find out that it is what in M2, M3 rather. So that is dollar M and then dollar 3, right? But then something is wrong here. I haven't put my equals to sign. Now, very, very important, whenever you're working in spreadsheet, you want to write out any function or any formula or calculation, whatever, you must always learn to start with the equals to sign. If not, you only are just writing a text value there, you will not get any result at all. Then I can press enter and then I'll just click auto fill. So you can see that every single value going down, they've all been multiplied by the VAT, which is 0.075, so easily for us there. So moving forward, now, okay. So at this particular point here, the next thing that we are going to try to do is to start writing out for functions to perform different things for us. Now, I want you guys to know first of all that functions are not like spells. They are not like mysterious incantations that you just have to memorize. They are just like shortcuts. They are like instructions that have already been pre-written, that Google Sheet knows how to execute this instruction. So your job is just to tell you what to calculate, to tell you which cells you are going to use, right? And then the function is going to do the rest of the calculations that you need to do. All right. So to be able to use functions, I've already created summaries. So we're just going to be trying out a few stuffs that are here. For example, if you wanted to calculate the total revenue that was generated by the company, we can use a function that is called sum, right? Sum normally means addition of everything, right? And we know that we want to look at from F2 down to F31. So at this point here, I'm going to type F2. Remember how we take ranges, right? Down to F31. And then I will press enter. The sum of all the amounts, all the revenues was 962,000 there. So that contains all the 30 others. Again, we can also try to find the average. The average is the arithmetic mean. So I can say average. Can say average revenue for average revenue. How do we do it? Equals to average, right? And now again F2 to F31 and then press enter. The average is what? 32,067. All this, you can see that the spreadsheet has saved you a lot of time. Instead of performing calculations by yourself, it has done the work for you. Next, you can try to calculate the maximum order, and then we can also try to find the minimum order. To find the maximum order, we use the function max, right? And then another way to do it, you can just come here, hold this down, right? And then let's say hold this down and then highlight down to the very last one that you want, which is F31 here, right? You can see it has brought them out for you here. So you just close your bracket and then enter, right? And then the minimum order, the minimum of that will be equals to mean, right? F2 to F31. So you can see how fast it is. But again, if this was a large data set that was containing thousands of rows, it will still work everything out very, very fast for you. In no time, the calculation is done. The next thing we are going to try to do is to do counting. That is, want to count what's at every point, right? So we do this using either of these two functions, the count COUNT, right? Or we can do what we call count A, that is count all, right? Now, the first one, count, you can take it, okay, let me just use this, let me try to paint a simple picture. Count is like, let me say, a bouncer at a party that is going to only let people that are wearing suits into the party, right? For example, in this case, count will only count numbers that are in a particular column, right? And then count A simply represents count all. It just lets everyone in that party, everyone that comes in that party, irrespective of what they wear, let all of them into the party, irrespective of whatever they are wearing. So I'm just going to say number of orders. Number of orders, that's going to be equals to COUNTA. And then I want to use the thank you, A22, A31. So we can see that we have 30 records here, irrespective of if it's a number or if it's a letter that is here. It's just going to bring out as long as the cell is not empty. If it was the count, count would like just count maybe only numbers, right? And it's going to leave out any cell that maybe contains letters, right? But in the case of count all, both letters, as long as a cell is not empty, it's going to count it as containing a particular record, right? For example, if we have let's say I want to check on the other amounts to make sure that there's no empty, although from physical observation you can see that there are no empty cells here, right? But supposing there were empty cells in a larger data set, we can figure out that by, for example, number of other amounts. Let's see, number of other amounts and say equals to count. The other amount is F2 to F31. It's also 30 because there are no empty cells here. As when there was an empty cell, maybe you might see something maybe 29 or thereabout, and then that's when you now go to that particular column and then you now begin to investigate why is this particular cell empty. Remember, these are data audit tips that you make use of. Next thing that we can try to do is to make use of what we will call logical functions, right? For logical functions is when I'm talking about, for example, if, let me put it like that, if logic. Now, if allows you to make decisions automatically, like it lets Google Sheet, make decisions based on conditions that you give it. It will like ask a question and then it will like give you a result if the answer is yes, and of course give you a different result if the answer is no, right? You can like think of it like a security guard at the door in a party. If you have a ticket, come in. If you don't have a ticket, wait outside, right? So the guard is just going to basically apply the same rule to everyone without having to think about each person individually. So how the if works is you write your if function, open your brackets, you write the condition, and then what you want your spreadsheet to read for you if the value is true, and then give it also if the value is false. For example, you wanted to look at this in, or based on the data set, we can create a condition that talks about the other types. So I'm just going to quickly do that, and then I'll write a simple if statement. If if let's say cell F2 is let's see, which threshold value should I use? Let's say if it's above 50,000, right? I want to say something like maybe the other value is high, and say a high value, right? Is it not? Or then if it's not above, then standard value. Like I said, how the if works is condition first. That's this points that you have here. Condition first, right? Then what you want it to show if it is true, and then what you want it to show if it doesn't meet the condition. Then press enter there, and then I'm just going to autofill, save ourselves some time. So you can see it's reading standard value here because it's less than what, 50,000. Likewise this one, but high value, see 7,000 is above 50,000. That's why you are seeing the high value reading here at this particular point. So that's the most basic if statement that you can have, that you can actually have there. And then of course we can decide to use conditional formatting to take out maybe just the high values that I want to see. I'll just go to formatting, I'll go to conditional formatting, and I'll say if text is exactly high value. So we don't always have to strain our eyes to look for where we have high value. So we can see where we have the high value here. Now the next thing, another way to write logic is to use what we call ifs. In this case now, you can now be able to fit in multiple condition and multiple results that you want to see, right? For example, let's say you want to say that, okay, if my order value is above 75,000, classify as premium customer. If it's above 25,000, classify as standard customer. And if it's less than 25,000, classify as a basic customer, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create, let's say, customer classification. So this one I'll be using ifs now because I want to write multiple condition inside. So I'm going to say if F2 is greater than 75,000, I want it to classify as premium customer, or if F2 is greater than 25,000, I want to classify as regular customer. And lastly, if F2 is uh, less than, okay, I think I'll just use greater than or equals 25,000 here. Then here I will use, okay, let me use greater than or equals 75,000 here, right? And then if F2 finally is less than 25,000, I want to let's say I want to classify as let's say basic customer. What should I use there that will just be the best? Anyway, I'm just going to press enter at this particular point, and you can see everything has been classified based on the order amount that is there. So I think to make things stand out, I'm going to format this particular one, also give the conditional formatting. For premium customers, maybe I should use the one that is exactly green. Premium customer, right? So I'm just going to press done, and I'm going to add another rule for text is, let's say, regular customer. For regular customer, I think I would like to have, let's say light blue. Yeah, I think that should work. Done. And then for the basic customer, for basic customer, say I'm going to have light orange here. Yeah. So you can actually create up to 3 conditions in just one single column there. So you can see now everything has been filtered. I know that my color green is high value customers and the rest of them. Oh, sorry, regular customer buys blue, and then the orange for basic customer, and then green is for the premium customer. So that's how you can actually have multiple condition inside a single logic by using the ifs, right? That's IFS. Now another one that you can combine the and or conditions, right? So before we look at the and or conditional logic, I'd like to paint a picture here, right? So for example, okay, to start with, first of all, the if works as a condition, right? For example, if this is true, do this, else do this, right? Now for the case of and or, they are logics, right? You need two or more conditions to be true for the outcome to be true. While the case of or, you need at least one condition to be true for the outcome to be true. Okay, so if I'm to like paint a practical scenario, let's say I have to go to work today, but now the conditions for me going to work is number one, if I already have a pressed shirt, that's my shirt is ironed already, and if it does not rain. That means that even if I have a pressed shirt and it rains, I won't go to work, right? Now, if or in the case of even if I don't have a pressed shirt, right, and it does not rain, I still would not go to work. So for me to be able to go to work today, I have to have a pressed shirt and it should not rain also. That's the only way I can go to work. Those two conditions must be fulfilled. But in the case of or, right? In the case of or, I can say, okay, I would go to work today if I have a pressed shirt or it does not rain. That means that in the case of either of them being true, in the case of either of the conditions fulfilling themselves, I'll be able to go to work. So that's like the difference between the two of them. Now, when you combine the and or all conditions along with the if logic, you build what we call a conditional logic. Now, every language, every way of communicating with your computer system, we all have conditional logics, right? And we have syntax. Let me put it like that. We have syntax. So we are going to just basically apply the same idea here in spreadsheet. We are going to look at conditional logic here. So let's start with the if and. I'd like to look at, let's say I want to create a column that I would call priority flag. I want to know which products should be seen as priority and which one I can do away with, right? So I want to flag the priority of my products based on the order amount. So I say something like if and, right? That's if and is what conditional logic. So I would say if and. Now if I'm looking at f2 is greater than let's say it's greater than 50,000. Yeah, it's greater than 50,000, and C2 is Nigeria. Remember, for conditional logic, you have to look at least two or more criteria, right, for you to have a result there. You can't just use only one rule. You need at least two or more rules for conditional logic. All right, so priority, that is, we should flag as priority, right? Or to make more sense, okay, this one, prioritize order. That I want us to prioritize this particular order, right? That's what I want it to flag as. Else, don't prioritize. Now the first case is Prioritized order is what you want it to show if the conditions are fulfilled, the both of them are fulfilled. In second case, don't prioritize is what you want it to return if the conditions are not fulfilled. So I'll just press. Oh, sorry, I forgot something. Remember, you are supposed to have your equals to sign whenever you are trying to write out a particular function there. So I'm just going to say autofill. And for majority of the others are saying don't prioritize, but yeah, there's something here to say prioritize uh order. So I think to make it make more sense, what will happen is this. I will just try to let me reduce the value so that we can have a little more for Nigeria. So that is I think that's what I will just do there. So I say don't prioritize. Well, I still have a lot of okay, let me still do something. I just want us to have at least two anyway. So I'm going to say if F2 is greater than or equals to 40,000. So I'm just going to do this. Yeah, I think we have up to two prioritized order now. So of course we are going to use conditional logic to flag, to be able to separate the two of them clearly. Sorry, I said conditional logic, conditional formatting, to be able to be able to identify the particular rules that has prioritized order. So but before we do that, let's just really look at the case of or. I'm sorry about that. So let's just really look at the case of or. Now, what does or look like? Let me use another flag. Let me say market flag here. I think that would be best to try to Control Z. So I shouldn't have done that. Was anything here before? Okay, I'm just going to add a column to the right. So I'm going to call this market order. Right? So yeah, I'm going to try to use the all now. I'm going to say something like, for example, if the country we are looking at is, for example, please, Nigeria or South Africa, we want to say that this is a key market. How do we do that? The same way we did here, and we say if or, right? Now, the country is C, right? So I'm going to say C2. If C2 is equal to Nigeria, right? This is the first case. Or C2 is equal to South Africa, right? This is the second case. I want us to call it key market, or say for the case when it's not fulfilled, not key market. Market or market? I don't know. I'm just going to press enter anyway and then autofill that. So to make everything stand out, let's quickly do a little conditional formatting here. So conditional formatting, I'm going to, for the case of priority flag, I'm going to say for if text is exactly prioritize order, right? So I want to do this. I'm going to add another rule. If text is exactly don't prioritize order. I'm just going to fill it with that light red. I think so. Why? Something seems to be wrong. Is there? Oh, don't prioritize. Yeah, that's what should be there. Okay, so done. So I'm just going to close this one, right? So we can see that we have to prioritize order here. And then I'm going to come to the case of market order also. If text is exactly key market, put it in green, add another rule. If text is exactly not key market, put it in that light red. Nope. Control Z. If text exactly not key market, I'm just going to edit this. Want it to be. Yeah. I think this makes a lot more sense. So yeah. So that's it. I think it makes a lot of sense to actually like have things stand out, right? So yeah, makes a lot more sense to like have things stand out. So you can still understand something about this data from the conditions that we just gave it. Uh, in this case of and it's possible for the other amount to be equal to or above 40,000, but simply because it's not in Nigeria or South Africa, it's not going to be taken as a key market. You can see how having these conditions helps us to be able to separate different parts of our data, parts that might have just been interpreted ordinarily. So that's that for conditional logic. So let's move forward. Next one we'll try to use is the VLOOKUP. Or generally, let's try to look at the two lookup functions, right? Now we're going to look at the VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, we can use it to find values across tables, right? For example, let's say you have your data in one place and you need to like bring in related information from somewhere, right? So you can say that VLOOKUP is like a librarian. Let's put it like that. If like the VLOOKUP function is like a librarian, so you give them a name. For example, you say, okay, I want us to find Chidi Okonkwo, and then they look through the shelves, they go to the right shelf, and then they find the right record for Chidi Okonkwo, and then they bring back the specific piece of information that you actually asked for, right? So how does VLOOKUP work? The VLOOKUP function, the first when you put your equals to VLOOKUP, the first thing you do is what you want to look for, then where you want to look for, you understand, where you want to find that information, and then which column to return, and then the exact to approximate value. So but take note that like the exact the that last argument, that's the exact or approximate value, right? For analytical work, it should almost always be false, please. False basically means you should find an exact match, right? Not approximate. True, if you use true, like that's true is like find the closest match, right? So there are different cases where you actually like apply this. So anyway, let's just really try to do something because we want to try to find out to work with the VLOOKUP function. So but before then, I'm going to do something very interesting. I'm going to just create a simple table here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to um okay, let me just label this as VLOOKUP. I'm going to fetch out all the names of all the countries in this data set. So I should reference column C, right? So I'm going to use unique. Unique allows you to fetch values right from a data set, like all the unique values so that it doesn't repeat itself. So I'm just going to say equals to unique C2 down to how do I use the unique again? C2 down to C31. I'm trying to remember how I use the unique again. But anyway, oh yes, that works fine. So you can see it brought out Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Rwanda. We just basically went to this particular column, see that has all the countries. Instead of us typing the names of the countries by ourselves, we just use unique to be able to bring out all the unique names. So because we don't have region in our data set, let's just try to do that ourselves. Nigeria is of course in West Africa. Ghana is also in West Africa. Kenya, where's Kenya? Kenya is in East Africa, I think so. If I'm not mistaken, except it has been shifted to another location anyway. And then you have South Africa. South Africa has to be in Southern Africa. South African bank can be in North Africa. And then Rwanda. Rwanda is of course in East Africa. So this is what we have here. So here's what I'm going to do now, because I want us to try to apply the VLOOKUP function, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a new column now. Now, I have a table I just created here. This is a table I want to make reference to. I want to make reference to this table. Using this table as a reference, I want to go to this my country columns. Now, for every country, I want to be able to just pick out the region here. Okay, that's that enough of the many talks. So I'm just going to show you what VLOOKUP does. So I would say equals to VLOOKUP. That's the very first thing first, right? And then I'm trying to make it, I'll say if C2, right? If C2, now remember the rule for VLOOKUP. The rule for VLOOKUP is what to look for. You want to look for this particular country and then you are going to match it with something, right? So now for C2, I want to now reference this table. Now, I know that this table is always going to shift. This particular table that is here is going to shift. So instead of just using the relative reference, I'm going to switch to absolute reference so that in case it shifts, it doesn't break any aspect of my formula. Of course, that table is from N12 to O16, so I'm just going to use the absolute reference there. Now, the next thing in VLOOKUP is that you want to now, what are you trying to return here? You are trying to return which of the column, the first column or the second column in this particular table. This country's part is the first column, this part here is the second column, so that's going to be taken as column 2, right? And then because we want to find the exact match, we'll then use what? False, so that I can return the exact match. So I'll press enter here. So you can see that for every country that is listed in Nigeria, Ghana, they are both in West Africa, right? Kenya is in East Africa. So every of these countries now, they've all been listed out, right? The region that they are all in as was listed out. Now the next one we're going to try is the XLOOKUP, right? Now VLOOKUP is very, very good, but these days XLOOKUP is used much more widely because it's like the modern way to do it, and it happens to just be more powerful than the VLOOKUP, right? So for example, VLOOKUP has a few limitations. The value, for example, that you are searching for must always be in the first column of your table, and you can only return values to the right. If you want to look left, or you want to search a column that is not first, then VLOOKUP cannot do that. In that case, XLOOKUP actually helps to like solve all of these problems. So it's more flexible and it's much more easier to read, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just create another column, which are okay. Let me say this column was for VLOOKUP. So I'm going to create another column that will now be regions for XLOOKUP. So I'm just going to insert one column, right? So I'm just going to say region XLOOKUP. So how does the XLOOKUP work, right? So I'm still going to make reference to this particular table that we just worked with here. That's this country and region table, this part down that we worked with. Okay, let me just rename this VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP so that it makes a lot more sense. Table, yeah, I think this makes a lot more sense here. So I'm going to just say okay, maybe let me merge this so that nothing changes eventually. So of course I'm going to say equals XLOOKUP again, right? And then C2 is what we want to look for. That's the country that we are trying to look for, right? And then I want to of course make reference to this particular table, but remember I'm using their absolute values. So I'm going to say dollar sign here and say the absolute reference rather, not the absolute value. So I'm going to say use the dollar sign there, right? And then oh sorry, I think I must have made a mistake here. This should be O12. we want to now the thing is we are not just trying to look at the table as it's wide, right? Sorry, O12 to O16 rather. Sorry about that. O12 to O16. Now we want to take each of the columns that we are working with. For example, the column that you want to search in, with that's the country column. You take the range of it separately. That's O12 to O16. Then you also take the column that you want to return your values from. In that case, that's P12 to as P sub $12 to $P$16. Remember, O12 to O16 is the first column you want to search in. Now P12 to P16 is the column that you want to return your values from. Now in the case of you not having a match, you can just return something like not found so that it doesn't leave anything empty or return any error for you. And then you press your enter and then autofill again. You can see it basically just does the same thing. For both cases, we are having the same result. But the difference between the first one and the second one is that for the second one, we took the whole table as it was wide like that, meaning that you can only return the values that are on the right of the table. But in the case of XLOOKUP, you specifically take which column you want to search from and then which column you want to return your values from. That's the difference between the two of them. And XLOOKUP just happens to handle this in a more modern way, in a way that looks more nice. Now the next thing we're going to try to do is we're going to try to work with text functions. Although there are really no much problems with the text values here, right? But just for the case of data cleaning, at some point you might you might have to make use of text function actually to do your data cleaning. And by text function I mean functions like trim. For example, there are lagging or leading spaces in text values like name and what have you. You might have to trim those values and all, right? So I'm just going to use I'm not going to create a special column for that. I'm just going to try to describe a few of these stuffs to you here. So let's say we have something like Nigeria here. You can see I gave space here, is it not? I gave space here. So I'm just going, let me give a space here. So this is how I'm going to keep it. And then we are going to use text functions on this particular guy. The first text function that we'll use is trim. So that how do you do that? Trim, I'll just say, okay, maybe because I want it to make sense, just in case you are working with this particular data, I'm just going to let me do this. I'm going to say uh text functions yeah, this makes more sense. So I'm going to just going to do this. I'm going to say Nigeria. So you can see that leading space at this point here. You can see before I can press my button and then do this. So I'm just going to just for us to understand, know a little about text function. This first one is going to be trim. So I can say trim O19, right? I'm going to say trim O19. Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. So I'm just going to put my $sign there, and then I'm going to press enter. So you can see now the original one there was a space at the front. In this case now the space has been taken away. We successfully taken away the white spaces. That's very very important in your data cleaning. Another one is that you can standardize the casing of letters. For example, you want to say in a particular column all letters should be uppercase, lowercase, or propercase. So for that case I would say equals to for example, for uppercase I would say equals to upper dollar. Okay, let me just do this. Yeah, I think it's better like this. Upper. So I'll just do this. So of course that's going to be dollar and then the $sign here. Let's press this. As you can see now, everything is uppercase, right? Same thing can be applied to lower. Oh, maybe I should have made this to be O20 instead, so that we don't have that space. Let's work with the one that doesn't have this space here. Okay, so yeah, the same thing applies to the case of lower. You say equals lower dollar O $20. Press enter. You can see everything is smaller. And then the last case now, I'm going to use cell 22. I'm going to say equals proper. I'm going to say dollar o sorry o $22. And why I'm using cell 22 is because that's the cell that had everything in smaller case. So you can see everything is back to the proper casing now. This was smaller case and everything is back to proper casing. But that's just basically what you most likely be doing in when you're working with text functions, right? And now sometimes too you might want to concatenate values. For example, let's say okay, let me do this. Let me just do this. Let me create a particular column so that we can just insert one column, right? So now I'm going to say country, right? Region. So I can just show you how to concatenate, right? Now there are different ways you can concatenate. The cell containing country is cell C2, right? So the first case I can do something like this, cell C2, right? And this is the very first way to concatenate values, right? So okay, I think it's nice to give space in between because that's exactly how it's going to work. And then the cell containing region is n, right? And then n2. Oh, sorry, I should say equals. Remember there should always be an equal to sign here, which I forgot to put here. I can put this inside brackets anyways, so I can do this. Now can you see how this works? Look at this. It's picked out all the countries and then their different region: Nigeria, West Africa, Ghana. So we don't even have to always be scrolling back here to the country. We just have everything staring at us here in this particular column. That's the very first way to concatenate. Now the second way to concatenate is by using the concat anyway. The concat just it still works the same way with this first case here where I did C2 and this. It still you get the same results anyway. Alright, so moving forward, we can also decide to extract different parts of a text, right? We can decide to extract, for example, in this order ID, we can decide to extract only the numbers. That instead of having the full TF1001 whatsoever, we can say we want to just extract only the numbers out of it. How do we do that? Insert one column, right? Again, I'm going to say ID numbers. What should I be here? Numbers only, right? So how do I extract only the numbers? Now to extract only the numbers, now you know that the numbers are only at the right hand side, is it not? Right? So I'm just going to say right because that's where the numbers are. In this ID you have TF10. The TF is on the left side, the numbers are on the right side. So to do that, I'm just going to say A2, right? And then I want to extract those four values at the right, and that's coming from the permit me to use this English or this grammar, the rightmost. I don't know if rightmost is correct. Is that a grammar? But anyway, I want to extract from the rightmost values counting four places. So it's going to extract 1001, 1002, and on and on. So that is exactly what I want to have as a result here. So you can see by the time I press this, you can see I've extracted all the numbers, and then I've left the TFs behind. You can see this. So there's a lot that you can do when you're working with the text functions. Also, you can also do a lot with the date functions too. The date functions are also very, very interesting. Now we already have a date column here, the other date column. So let's see some of the things that we can do with the date function. So first I would like to try something here so that it's going to make a lot of sense to us. Date function. You can actually see today's date. You can know the date I'm making this video. If I use the date function, I would say equals now, right? Or this would give you, I'm actually making this video okay, the second part of this video, sorry, at wow, 1st of August 2026 at 4:22. Sorry, it's 5:22 a.m. This is 1 hour backward anyway. And then I can set to do equals to today. Today is also another one. Today just gives me the dates. The now gives me the time also. So anyway, let's just see how can we even apply this in the data that we are working with, right? Now, for example, if you want to know how many days an order was placed, you want to know how many days ago an order was placed, we can say today's date minus the date where this order was placed. Our order is in E2, right? So imagine we do something like this. We want to say, okay, days since order placed. We want to know, okay, which of these orders are pending and or days since order placed. How many days has it been since each order was placed? Which of want to know, okay, which one are we taking so much time? We can do, we can actually do something like equals to today minus which column is containing the dates for order placed. Which column is the order date, right? That's E2 is the column that is containing that, right? And then what I'll just do is to press enter. So you can see as at the time of making this video, it's 941 days since the order was placed. That's today minus the day the order was placed. 941 days. That's quite interesting. And you can actually do the same thing. You can actually apply the same thing for year. For example, you can say that you want to extract only the years, right? So extract only the year. Let's say year of order, or for example in certain column, right? You can say year of order, year of order. In this case, I'll use the year function. That's also a date function anyway. Year, right? And then I'm trying to look at the year that order was placed. That's column E, right? So E2 that order was placed in 2024. So you can see all the orders here were placed in 2024. That's why if I change the value here to 2025, you will actually see it reflected as 2025, right? So that gives us the years. We can do this for the day, we can do this for the months also. You can do it works the same way. You say equals to day. For months, you say equals months, and then put your cell in the brackets. So another thing that we can try to do, there's also another way to try to find the day since. In fact, to be very honest, there are multiple ways to try to do a whole lot of things when you're working with spreadsheets. So let's move forward to conditional aggregation. The beauty of conditional aggregation is that it allows you to answer questions that a manager is likely to ask, right? Like uses like this way you even apply most of your real world cases here, right? For example, if they say how many orders came from Nigeria, right? Or questions like what's the total revenue from electronics, or what's the average order value for delivered orders only. Now, you can't answer those questions with just plain sum functions or count functions. You would have to use conditional aggregation here, like the sum if, count if, and you can even do sum ifs. You can even do count ifs. So I think to make that interesting, I would like to do the work in our summary table here. I think that would actually make more sense. For example, I want to know how many orders came from Nigeria. Number of orders from Nigeria. I can easily just use the count if function here. I will say count if. Now, in this case, for me to use the count if, it means that I have to look at the cell that contains, or the column that contains Nigeria is from column C2 down to C31. That's where I'll find Nigeria. So I have to say count if C2 to C31 here. And what value do I want to specifically reference? Nigeria. So you can see No, sorry, cancel this. So you can see that number of orders from Nigeria, there were 7 orders from. We can go ahead and count it manually by ourselves, but nobody's going to. If you had a data set of say about 1,000 rows, you're not going to count all this manually. So this just helps us to do it. So we know that there were 7 orders from Nigeria. Now we can also do the same thing for Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Rwanda. For example, you also want to know how many field deliveries you have. You can say number of field deliveries of field deliveries, right? And then you can say something like count if, right? Now where's the column that contains that's delivery status, right? So you want to know between delivered and failed. So I'm just going to take the whole of that column, that's G2 to G31, and then I'm going to put field here so we can know the number of field deliveries that we had. There were 5 field deliveries in total. Let's try and count manually and know if our work is done here. We have 1, we have 2, we have 3, we have 4, and then we have 5. So in a larger data set, this will be, can be applied. You can trust this to apply. These are ways of answering the questions from the board without having to stress yourself. You then can put it as part of your dashboard or whatsoever when you are doing your analysis. Now, another way to count is to count by multiple conditions. We did count if. Now we are going to do count ifs. We want to have multiple conditions, right? For example, if we want to say something like, how many electronics come from Nigeria? The first condition has to look at electronics, and then we also have to look at Nigeria. But how this one works is that it works from behind down to the front. So how many electronics come from Nigeria? Okay, number of electronics from Nigeria. Electronics from Nigeria. So I'm going to use the count ifs now because now I'm having multiple conditions, right? Now the first thing that how the count if works, first you have to filter the column you are working with, that's Nigeria. Remember I said you are going to come from behind down to the front. So when working with count ifs, number of electronics from Nigeria, the last thing to look at is Nigeria. The first thing to look at is electronics. Sorry, the last thing you ordinarily look at is Nigeria. The first thing you look at is electronics. Then flip the both of them. When you're writing your function, you then go to the column that has Nigeria and then you conclude with electronics. Remember, let me come again. I said I wanted us to look at number of electronics from Nigeria, right? Ordinarily, we would say, okay, how many electronics are there, and then filter by Nigeria, right? That's the simple logic to follow, right? But now, how we then works is that we'll now go, okay, let's save ourselves some stress. So I'm just going to come to this particular point here where we have Nigeria here. That's the column rather that contains Nigeria, and then I'm going to do Nigeria here, right? And then I'm going to go to the second column that contains all electronics, that products category rather, which is D2 to D31, right? And then I'm going to filter by electronics, right? Then I'm going to close this and press enter. So you can see that for Nigeria, there were only 2 purchases of electronics. That's what to do. From Nigeria, there were only 2 purchases of there were only 2 electronics purchased here. All right. So the same thing, you can try to calculate how many field deliveries you had from Kenya and the rest of them. Now next, let's look at another conditional aggregator function, which we call the SUMIF. Also works the same way as the COUNTIF, just that in the case of sum you are adding values. For example, if you wanted to calculate the total revenue from Ghana, of course you use the SUMIF, right? So you are going to say equals SUMIF, right? And then C2 C2 to C31, right? And then you want to look at Ghana. And then what are the corresponding, now you are going to have to look at two ranges now to solve. The first is where the first range, CUC31, is a country column where you have to pick Ghana from. And then the second range you are going to look at is the other amounts. Now you are going to sum these guys. But what happens here is that you're not summing all the values, you're only summing the ones that are fixed for Ghana alone. That's what you're supposed to do. So I'll press enter, then you can see that the total number of the total number of orders from Ghana was 199,500. That's total revenue from Ghana, rather. All right. Now the same way you would do this also for the case of some ifs. Some ifs, for example, you want to find total revenue from electronics order in South Africa. You'd have to go from you have to look at the total revenue, and then you have to look for electronics, and then you have to conclude with what South Africa. So I'll just say total revenue, total electronics revenue from South Africa. So I'll say equals some if. Now I'll go to my revenue column, right? And then I'll take everything there, so F31. And then the next thing I'll then do is I'll go and filter electronics. I'll go to this point here, filter out all electronics from D2, D31. So of course I'm going to say electronics. Did I spell it well? Yeah, electronics is well spelled. And then lastly, I'll then go to my country column and pick out all countries that are there. And then what is the country I'm looking at specifically is South Africa. And that's all. Total revenue from. Why? Did I do something wrong? Oh, some ifs, not some if. That should be some ifs. Yeah, no wonder. Thought I did something wrong. So I'm just going to format this also, just to make it look clean. I'm going to say Nigerian naira and then remove my decimal point. So we've successfully done a lot here, and I think the last thing we'll try to look at is we can also look at the average, we can look at the average if, and then we can look at the average ifs also. For example, we want to look at the average order value for Nigeria only. Average order value for Nigeria only. You can say average if, right? And then we'll go and select that C2 to C31 rather, right? And then I want to pick out, oh sorry, not C31 first. Or anyone actually works fine. I'll just say I want to pick out the Nigeria. And then F2 to F31. So this is the average order value from Nigeria. Of course, you know where C2 and the column C. Column C, of course, you know that it contains your name of countries, and then the F contains your revenue column. But then we are not finding the sum, we are finding the average of all the orders from Nigeria only. All right, and then I think one more thing we'll try to look at is the average ifs, right? We can look at average order value for electronics orders that were delivered. That seems long. Anyway, average order value for uh, for, for electronics were delivered, right? So yeah, we'll use the average ifs, then open your brackets, and then we first of all go to our revenue column F2 to F31, right, we want to calculate the average from. Then go to D2 to D31 and select only electronics from there. Electronics, of course, this one is our product category. And then we now want to go to G2, G31, where we have status like delivered or filled whatsoever. This is G31, and then want to select only the ones that were delivered. All right, so that's the average order value for electronics that was delivered is 4,500. All right, so there are just so many things that we can do when working with our data. So what I would naturally advise is you having a reference sheet. Reference sheets are always coming very, very handy. They'll be very important in your work as a data. By reference sheet, I mean a cheat sheet where you have you can have all your different formulas that you most likely always be working with when doing your data analysis. Sometimes you might forget a thing or two, and it will be very, very nice to have all this. Sorry, it's very, very nice to have all this as part of your as something that you can easily look at. That's I'm talking about the reference sheets. It's very nice to have a reference sheet that you can always look at whenever you have a question or two to ask, or you really can't remember the formula you were working with. So it's always nice to I recommend having this. I'm going to cut this from here, and then I'm just going to okay no I think that's okay. Yeah. Oh, what did I do? Anyway, I'm just going to let's give it some color so that we can then separate all our values from each other. We can say Control B. I'm just going to do this, and I think I'll change the color here. I would like to know if you observed something here. When I did this, I saw that 4:23 a.m. and now we're showing you can see that the date. It's every time if I open this sheet another time, the date is going to change. Likewise, the time too, because it's a function that is running there, not a fixed value that I just typed there. So have that in mind. So by the time you are watching this video and you are doing yours, you might not get these exact values that are here. That's because your dates and time will probably be different by the time this video is up. So there's a lot you can do, but these are like the most important stuff you'll be working with. Your data sets will always be much larger in real world, but it doesn't change anything at all. These are still the functions that you almost always be working with, the formulas, the stuff you most likely be doing during your analysis. So in our next video, we'll continue we'll work with a much larger data set because we want to try to paint a real world scenario. We'll start from the cleaning down to building the dashboard, but that will be in like 3 parts. So thanks for watching this video. Do well to like this video, share this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Remember, we have a Telegram community that we are also trying to expand, so please do also join the Telegram community. I'll drop the link to every single thing in the description of this video. I'll drop the links to the data sets, I'll drop the links to the Telegram community, I'll drop every links that is worth dropping. So do also check the description of this video for every other thing you're looking for. And remember, we have a playlist also in case you did not start from scratch. You can go through our playlist and start from scratch for the other videos that we have. And then if you are looking for projects to work on, visit our projects playlist too. Very interesting stuff to look at there. So once again, thanks for watching this video, and I remain Gabriel Udio.